Hey everyone! Welcome back, High Frequency Squad, to another edition. Welcome back, High Frequency Squad. Welcome to another edition of High Frequency Teaching, where we cultivate high frequency thoughts, make high frequency moves to get high frequency results that make high frequency impact. I am Claudicia, your culture coach, and I am excited about our edition today. We are talking about rules versus relationships. Which should we prioritize? Which is more important, right? And it's not a trick question. There is one that we should actually prioritize over the other. So we're going to talk about that today. Also, wanted to let you guys know, let me know in the comments topics that you would love for us to explore, to dig deep in, questions that you have. And then feel free to DM me as well. As we move forward, if there are questions or you have thoughts and concerns. All right, let's recap. So last week we talked about, week one, we talked about what high frequency was. All right, so if you missed that, go back. But high frequency in detail. So in general, high frequency is all about higher level teaching that produces results. It is data based. It is differentiated. It is personal. It is up close. However, it infuses the joy of learning. Okay, all right. And then there's something about when the kids are having fun, you can have fun. It's a never-ending cycle, and we kind of feed one another. Okay, so we're going to be talking about today rules versus relationships. And if you've been following us all the posts this week, everything has been focused on classroom management. There's a lot of buzz around classroom management. And so we want to talk about, well, what is classroom management? What isn't classroom management? And then how do we get classroom management? You can't go to the store and buy you some, although if you've been in a classroom as of late, especially coming back from our home school during the pandemic, and I hesitate to say during the pandemic because we are still in the midst of the pandemic, but when we were all in lockdown and we were doing school from home, so it's a totally different thing. And if you are a new teacher that recently started teaching in the last 2 to 3 years, coming back to a classroom is a big deal because you're not actually coming back. This may be your first go at it, or maybe last year was your first go at it and it was totally different from when you were online. There are just some aspects that are totally different. And so we're going to talk about what classroom management is not and what it is. Let's jump in. First of all, classroom management is not a bunch of rules. I know, so now you're like, okay, Harry, so if it's not rules, then does that mean we don't need rules? Absolutely, we have to have structure in the classroom. And there is a way to infuse that structure, but it's not just a bunch of thou shalts and thou shalt nots, okay? And there's a mindset that has to be in place as the educator in order for us to relinquish some of that control. We're not saying this is my rule, this is what I say, and what I say goes. Okay? All right? So, number 2, classroom management is not the teacher being large and in charge, the sage on the stage. I'm the boss. Everyone else listen to me, right? And it may seem in classrooms like that the teacher has things under control. However, if you watch that teacher, you will see there's a lot of work that they have to put in to be large and in charge, sage on the stage, always the one, And if you're with us, definitely say hi. And if you're catching this on the replay, put in hashtag replay in the comments. That lets me know that you watched this. All right, we want to be able to say hi. Welcome those of you coming in. All right, so number one, classroom management is not a bunch of rules. Number two, it is not the teacher large and in charge, sage on the stage. And I'm going to say this, and some individuals might cringe a little, but classroom management is not quiet students sitting at desks, seated in rows. Hi, Darla. Hi, Dana. That's not classroom management. Again, it looks orderly. It may even feel orderly, but that is not classroom management. So, well, what is classroom management? So glad you asked. Here's the deal. The more control that you're able to relinquish and give back to your students, the more control you give to your students, the better managed your class will be. I'm going to say that again because for some of us, I just knock the breath out of us, okay? When it comes to a well-managed classroom, the more control you are able to give to your students and relinquish that, like here, this is for you to manage, the better managed the class will be, all right? Now, we'll talk about why that is in just a moment, because we talked about what classroom management is not. Now we need to talk about what classroom management is, okay? So classroom management is not a bunch of rules. What it is a bunch of shared expectations. What? What is that? And what's the difference? Well, I'm going to tell you, the older the student is that you're working with, the more and more and more you will understand this right away. Sometimes when you're working with little kids, everything's new, you know, so hey, they can get away with that, right? Okay? And you can get away with, I said do this, and then the little kid's like, okay, I'll do it, right? We call that compliance. That is not management. Again, the more control you give away, the better managed the class is, all right? And I've got some commenting. Thank you guys. I love it when we interact. And so Dana says we want independent learners. That's what we're developing. Absolutely, absolutely, right? And again, that's why I'm giving up the control. Now, we can't just hand over control and then sit back and be like, whoo, I can't wait until, no, it's not like that. So we're going to talk about what that looks like, but when we say shared expectations, that means that you are getting buy-in from your students, all right? So for example, the language even that we use. When I say to my class, what expectations do you have? Or this is my expectation, that's a little different than here's the rule, do what I say. And if you don't, ... Okay. Number two, we said that classroom management is not the teacher large and in charge, sage on the stage, do as I say. Instead, I want you to envision your role as teacher as facilitator, all right? Facilitator. We're going to come back to that. You are in charge of facilitating learning experiences. Hey Mia, how are you? You are facilitating a learning experience. Now today we're not going to talk about how to make learning an experience, but I want you to tune in each week, Thursdays, and again, as I mentioned earlier, drop in the comments topics that you'd like us to cover, and we will definitely work to fit those in, and you can always DM me, all right? All right, so number one, classroom management is not a bunch of rules. It's shared expectations. Shared means that we're getting student buy-in, we're getting input. We're going to talk about how to do that in just a moment. Number two, it is not the teacher large and in charge. I'm in control. Everything I say you will do, and that's that. And then instead, we're facilitating learning experiences. And number three, we said classroom management is not quiet students sitting in rows, listening to instruction in desks, okay? Instead, classroom management is authentically engaged students. Now notice I didn't just say engaged, because some of us think that as long as a student is looking at us or in our direction, as long as their voice is off, and as long as they are not disruptive, everyone in here's learning. No. Actively engaged is authentically engaged, means that they are actually coming to the lesson prepared to give some of what they've learned and give some of what they know. So they're actually going to not just, show up physically, they are going to participate in the discourse. They are going to add to the value of that lesson by engaging, by talking, by questioning, all right? And in order for you to get students to engage on that level, there are a few things we have to do to set the stage, all right? So let's talk about how do we get this well-managed class, all right? And for those of you who weren't in earlier, I want you to take a look. I dropped a picture in of 2 different classrooms, and I really want you to take a look at that and think through, what would it take for my classroom to look like this? What would it take for my classroom to sound like this? And so there's one picture where all the kids are sitting in rows. They look very orderly and neat and quiet, and they're all facing forward. And then there's another where it looks like the kids are kind of up and about. And my husband is not an educator, and I just showed him the 2 pictures and said, what do you think? And immediately he said one looks orderly and the other looks like crazy is going on. And so if you're not careful, we will throw out the rows and the orderly desks, and we'll throw in all the crazy without actually getting the ingredients and mixing it just right, so you actually end up with a managed class instead of mayhem. So you can't just let anything go, right? So let's go back and let's start with the expectations, because even though we said we are going to not have rules that we just come up with and that's that, there are expectations that need to be in place, because there needs to be an environment that's conducive to growth, all right? So at the start of the year, you want to do an expectations exercise. Let me tell you a little bit about what I've done in the past and see if that might be helpful, right? The kids come in, they don't know me, I don't know them, and the first thing that I do is not tell them all my rules. They already have in their mind what they think, and I don't know if I told you guys, I taught math. So they already think I hate math. I don't know who this teacher is, but I hate what she's about to teach me. And then the first thing I hit them with is rules. That's not a good combination, okay? So what will we do? They come in, and then the first thing that I'm doing is I want to engage them and find out their experiences with math. We talked about this last week a little bit, all right? But then I want to get their expectations of a great teacher. So I want them to step outside of where we are right now, and I want them to start envisioning amazingness happening in this room for the school year. So I'm asking them, what classrooms, think about the classrooms where you had the best experiences. What kind of teacher did you have? And they have a sheet of paper, and they will just start brainstorming, right? Writing down things. And I just throw out little prompts to kind of help them with thinking through. What are some expectations that you have for teachers, your teachers? What can I do that would make your year amazing? And they start writing, and you will not believe. Hey, Nicole. Hey. You will not believe. Even the quietest of students will start writing on the first day, right? And so they write. I give them about 5 minutes or so to write out whatever they have, and then I collect, and I tell them, you can put your name on the paper or you don't have to. It's fine. It doesn't really matter. I collect, usually have about 15 to 20 students in a class. Sometimes I had like closer to 30. All right, but nonetheless, I collect all the papers, and then we start going through these expectations they have for me. And I allow students to, I don't call names. If there's a name on the paper, I just read it out loud, and I get some feedback from the class. What do you think about that? Well, this paper says that they would like the teacher to be fair. How do you guys feel about that? Have you ever had teachers who weren't fair? What did that look like? And so what happens is we start having a conversation, and what's happening is they're getting a chance to know me, but I'm getting a chance to understand them and their experiences. By the way, when we finish this conversation and going through all of these papers, that's a good 20 minutes. Yeah, that's going to take up a lot of class time. But I'm going to tell you, it has been one of the most fruitful activities that I have done in any school, regardless of whether it was a private school, public school, charter school, independent school, whether it was like very, very small, maybe 15 students, 12 students. I even had 8 students one year in a public school, right, in a class, right? So it doesn't matter how big or small the class is or where they are, all of them have responded the exact same way. But I get all of their expectations, and then I consolidate them on the board. So we are putting them up, and by the time we get done, I've got like 15, 16 expectations that they have of me. But it's usually the stuff, believe it or not, that makes a great teacher. And we're talking about being high-frequency teachers, high-frequency educators. So now they've given me their expectation, and I say, you know what? I believe that all of these expectations are things that a great teacher does. And so we are going to, I want you to hold me to that. And if you think of anything else, let me know. And I want you to know everything we do is going to be about me being this sort of teacher for you. So already we have helped the students understand that their voice matters. Now, I can share with them my expectations. And by the way, you need to think those through now. Not only do you need to have a much shorter list than they do, but you want to make sure that they are positively worded. So my expectations were very simple. Respect yourself, others, and their property. Leave your seat with permission. So instead of like stay in your seat, right, or don't get up without asking, right, I'll just say leave your seat with permission. Speak. You can speak with permission. Let's see what else we have. Come to class prepared. And the last one was stay on task. That's it. And you try to make them broad enough to cover a whole lot of things, but at the same time, when it comes to control, remember I said, the more control you can give to them, the better managed the class will be. Why is that? Think about the ratios. You are one person and there are 20 of them. So 20 versus 1. What are the odds that you are actually physically able to manage every single one of your students at the same time? I can barely manage myself. So I am working in everything that I do to help the students, as Dana said earlier, to be autonomous, to be independent, to learn to manage themselves. And all I am doing is facilitating their being able to manage. So what skills do I need? What functioning skills do I need in order for me to be able to manage myself? All right? That's a whole nother session. We'll talk later. All right. So going into number 2, we said the teacher should be a facilitator. Okay, so how does that happen, right? Let's go back to the word facilitator. Facilitator is made from the verb facilitate and the suffix or. Now see, I know the language professional will appreciate that. All right, so here we go. The suffix or means one who, a person who. So technically a facilitator is a person who facilitates. Well, I always tell my kids, look, don't define the word with the word. So what does facilitate mean? So glad you asked. Facilitate, looked it up, Google, makes an action or process easy or easier. Makes an action or a process easy or easier. So then a facilitator is a person who makes things easy or easier, right? So when you are the facilitator of learning, you are a part of making your students' experience easier. Now, who's not going to jump on board with that, right? My students hated math, but I presented myself as an individual who was there to help make the process of learning easier. And so there, already, we've eliminated the fight for most of the students, okay? All right? Now, lastly, authentically engaged students. A well-managed classroom has authentically engaged students. So let's just back up and understand a thing or two about engagement. First of all, people in general engage people. You know, you scroll through Facebook, you scroll through LinkedIn, you scroll through Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Most videos, most clips are getting the engagement these days because a person is engaging with a person. Okay? All right? Now, people engage positively versus negatively with people they know, like, and trust. I'm going to say that again, and you want to write that down. People engage positively with people they know, like, and trust. So now let's bring this into the classroom, because that right there, I just dropped some nuggets right there that you could actually take into your personal life. But let's bring this into the classroom with our students. And remember, we're talking about a well-managed classroom, and we're talking about how do we get these authentically engaged students who are not just compliant and sitting quietly in your classroom, but are actually contributors to the learning experience. Okay? To authentically engage your students, they must like, know, and trust you. Point blank. And the more of that happens, the better they will engage. And you know how they say, oh, kids, they have these short attention spans, and you got to be all exciting for them and keep them engaged because kids these days. Okay. The more they know you, the more they like you, and the more they trust you. I'm going to tell you some of my lectury classes, most lectury classes, right? I know that's probably not a word, but they were glued to the subject matter, but more importantly, they were connected to me as an educator, as their instructor, as their facilitator of the experience. They trusted that what I was giving to them was of the utmost importance for them. Not just because I'm collecting a check, or this is what the lesson plan says, or we're going to take a test at the end of the week, right? They understood that there was a connection for them in each lesson. Okay? Again, people engage positively with people they know, like, and trust. It's very difficult to like someone that you don't know. It's very difficult to trust someone you don't like. Hence, as teachers, no, we're not trying to be our students' best friend. But that doesn't mean we go out of our way to make life miserable, okay? In the classroom, if the learning experience should be joyful, the learning experience should be fun, but the learning experience also needs to be meaningful. Again, that's a lesson for another day, okay? All right, so now we're going to close out with this. I want you to think about the answers to these two questions. And if you can answer these two questions, you are well on your way to a well-managed classroom. Question number 1, I want you to think through. What can I do to make the learning easier? And every opportunity you have, show your class and show your students how this learning experience can be joyful. So what can you do? What can you infuse in the lesson, whether it's how you say it, whether it's what you say? What can you infuse that will make the learning joyful? Number 2, how well do my students know me? Think about that. Do your students know you well by the end of the year? Honestly, that's too late. The year is over. It's time to move on. And in most cases, you won't even have those students again the following year. So you've got to find ways to collapse time and allow your students to get to know you in ways that will be meaningful for their success. All right? So let's recap classroom management. Classroom management is not a bunch of rules. Classroom management is not teacher large and in charge, sage on the stage. Classroom management is not a whole bunch of quiet students sitting in desks in rows. And by the way, there are times when that's appropriate. Hey Valeria, what's going on? There are times when that is appropriate, okay? Maybe when we're testing, okay? Or you're trying to get individual results. But under no circumstances should your room stay in rows all year long, okay? What classroom management is, it is shared expectations between the teacher and the students. It is the teacher as a facilitator of the learning experiences, which should be joyful. And it is authentically engaged students. Think about what that looks like. Think about what that sounds like. And even though there may be noise going on and there may be activity, but think about the whole idea that the energy in that room is producing more energy, and when that energy is high, that's when the high frequency learning takes place. Remember, we need high frequency thinking, high frequency moves, high frequency results that are going to make high frequency impact. Lastly, the more control you are able to relinquish, the more you're able to give to your students, the better managed your class will be. That's all for this week. I will see you next week, same time, same place, when we will be focused on student engagement. I look forward to seeing you there. Hey, hey, hey. Bye.